Today's sponsor of the Vision Quest podcast is 920 Hat Company. Leather patch hats are in, and 920 Hat Company is here to hook you up with your very own custom hat. All patches are lasered on top-grade genuine leather and on popular brand hats like Richardson and FlexFit. Whether you're looking to show off your business or want a one-of-a-kind hat for yourself, 920 Hat Company can do it all. All the hats are handcrafted right in the Fox Valley, but worn across America. With over 500 hats in stock, they guarantee fast turnaround times. Honestly, Liam, looking at these hats, solid, right?
Yeah, they're pretty. I like them.
I like that patch itself.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, one-of-a-kind stuff. I know his name's Trevor. He does great work. He's actually gotten I think we got a knit hat coming.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, we got that coming. So we're really excited to have these guys on board as a sponsor. So get down to check them out on Facebook. I believe they're on Instagram. Check them out, man. They got the best hats, I think, in the Fox Valley, if not in the state.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So get down to 920 Hat Company on social media and check them out. All right. We are live for yet another episode of the Vision Quest podcast. It's been a couple weeks. I think we got pretty busy, but we have a great guest on tonight. We are joined by none other than coach and also author Ron Lang. I appreciate you joining us. How you doing, sir?
Doing great. I'm glad to be here.
It's awesome. It's awesome. We talked a little bit beforehand and kind of talking to you. It sounds like you and I are kind of the same wavelength about a lot of things, especially when it comes to the growth of the sport, right? Ultimately, you wrote this book, obviously, to help kind of grow things as far as that goes. But we're going to touch on that. We're going to get on to the growth thing, but we got to talk about you first. Not everybody knows you. Not everybody knows what you got going on. So where did you get your startings in sports? Where are you from first?
So I was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. Nice. But I didn't get my wrestling start until I lived in Indiana.
8th grade year, I think it was, right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
So my 6th grade year, we moved across the river from Louisville to southern Indiana. And as a lot of people, right, I got my start by being cut from the basketball team or another sports team, right? That's actually a funny story. We were practicing, and somebody came in and talked to the coach. We're scrimmaging, and I picked up my dribble, and I had 1 foot behind the 3-point line, and or on the 3-point line. And I look over and I see him, and it looked like he wasn't paying attention. So I step back, I travel, and I take the shot. So not only did I miss the shot, I traveled. He saw the whole thing, and I got cut. So, but we actually had a good team. Our 8th grade team won the state tournament that year. So
nice.
Yeah, so they were good. But I ended up going to wrestling. Had a friend of mine talk me into it, and then before I ever even got to be on the mat, I ended up breaking my ankle. And so my freshman year was really my first year of wrestling.
Right on. Okay. So let's talk. How big were you your 8th grade year? You're a pretty tall guy.
Yeah. So I'm about 6 foot.
Okay.
My freshman year, I wrestled 171 pounds.
Okay. Okay.
Funniest
Man's
thing.
weight.
I'm sorry.
Man's weight. Right away.
Oh yeah. I was pretty hefty. I was a husky kid, right? So,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you, the funniest thing about that was I go in my first. It was a 5-way, we called it. 5
Okay.
duels, and
Yep.
so we're in the weigh-in lines, and I see this guy. He's all yoked up. He's got a mustache, and I'm thinking, okay, wonder what weight he is. Well, like you said, it was a man's weight. He was my weight. So not only is he in my weight class, he's the first guy I have to wrestle in a match. So I go out there. I'm like, just do what you can do. And the guy's a fish, right? He shoots in on me. I turn him over. I pin him. He wasn't very good. I get forfeits the rest of the way, and I'm thinking, I'm the man. I've got this. Man. Yeah. So I probably won about 6 matches the rest of the year.
The story of my life too with wrestling. I mean, I quit my junior year, but I couldn't string wins together once I got into high school. Man, youth wrestling was a blast. I got up in high school. God, forget about it. I was not good at all. So I can equate to how many wins you had. I think after I got to my junior year, I maybe accumulated 12 wins. That's 3 years of high school wrestling. That was not impressive at all. So your upbringings were obviously athletics. Were your parents in athletics?
No, not really. Now they weren't opposed to me being in athletics, but for instance, I always wanted to play football, and we didn't have a team when I lived in Louisville. Before we moved, we didn't have a team. And the year I begged and begged, I went to our principal, asked, I kind of campaigned to have a football team. I moved to Southern Indiana. They had one.
Yeah.
So I was able to play, but back where I moved from, they started that year I left. I'm like, oh, great. I never get to. So, and we actually played those guys too, but.
Oh, really? No kidding.
Yep.
So kind of going through high school, obviously you like sports, you're athletic, and what did that lead to you? Was this something like, I want to go to college and I want to do the sport, or were you not, were you kind of weaning off of sports and just wanted to go to school?
No, I was a football guy. Thankfully, I always wanted to coach as well. And so I went to University of Kentucky, worked with the football team, continued to be involved with the coaching aspect. And then when I got out of school, so that's kind of a funny story. People are like, well, why weren't you a GA? At the time, the Division I coaches were not coming from graduate assistant positions. They were coming from the lower ranks. You coached and recruited your own position. So, I mean, I coached in Maine, coached in Northern Indiana, coached different colleges.
Wow.
And the funny story, a lot of people don't know about, even my family don't know a whole lot about, but I had the opportunity to coach, to be a GA with Nick Saban at Michigan State.
Ooh, nice.
So, you say you don't have regrets in life, but had some conversations with some people there and some other folks, and I made the decision to go coach my own position, stay coaching my own position, and not be a graduate assistant. And next thing you know, he goes to LSU. There's a lot. I mean, people have different thoughts about this, but a lot of his coaching staff were GAs from different places that he was given a chance to, and it was like, man, but it is what it is, and still enjoyed it. Now I'm in Texas, so I ended up moving from the college ranks to the high school ranks. What better place, right, than Texas high school football?
Yeah,
and my wife's from this area, so I did some high school coaching as well in the state of Texas.
So with your coaching background, what sport did you find more fulfilling to coach? Was it just football you coached, or were you coaching other sports?
So, it's hard to say, right? It's almost like when you say, what's your favorite kid?
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of great things with it. At the end of the day, coaching, the best part about coaching is seeing that development with the players, not just on the field or on the mat, but within themselves.
100%. 100%.
And so, really the sport's almost inconsequential, right? Because at the end, you want to. My goal was always for my athletes to either fulfill or exceed their potential, whether it be athletically or personally, whatever it may be. Even like we were talking about colleges earlier. So you have the potential to be a Division II guy, and all of a sudden you become a Division I wrestler because of your effort and everything else that you've put into it. I mean, those are the things that I enjoy. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest joys in life as a whole for me is so I used to coach a high school outside of Austin, Texas, and I was driving through and I stopped at a gas station and one of my old players comes, "Coach," and just them calling me coach and then telling me, and they weren't even my position, but telling me the impact I had on them. And this is 10 years after the fact. And then introducing me to their kids. I was like, that was really cool. So
I can agree with that. So I remember when Liam first started, I was helping coach a youth program, and I tried not to focus on him because he's my kid. He can go over there and do something with the other coaches, right? But I still took it wasn't a position, but I still took the job seriously. I still went in trying to encourage and enlighten kids as much as possible, and just, hard work will get you places you wouldn't even believe, right? And I remember there was this mom that came up to me, and I wore sweatshirts, right? I wore a hooded sweatshirt all the time at practice. I made it look like I was this guy trying to sweat off pounds, like I'm the high school guy in the room, kind of helping out, when I'm just 32-year-old, 34-year-old fat guy that's just walking around the rest of the room helping kids. And by the end of the season, I think it was the end of that season. Yeah, it was the end of that season. That kid would work out at home. And when he worked out at home, he wore a sweatshirt all the time. Always wore a hooded sweatshirt. The mom came up to me. She goes, "He has never worn a hooded sweatshirt like this until he came in the room and met you. And he's been wearing hooded sweatshirts all the time when he works out." I loved that so much. I was like, I took a lot from that. And then soccer, I had another great story that came with it. So it's always the impact that you have in these kids being able to I don't like the word influence, because I think influence gets thrown around a little bit too much, but encourage them. You encourage them to do things that might be a little more difficult than what they would actually try to do. And you plant that seed in their head to make them successful. To me, I think is the best thing that I could probably feel out of coaching kids, no matter what. I just got done telling our kids the other night, it was 3-0. It was halftime. I said, don't even look at the scoreboard. I don't care about the scoreboard. I care about how you guys are progressing. I care about how you guys look right now, because they're all down. We're like, oh, we're losing. You know how kids are. So that's to ignore it. As much as I want the W, I want to see you guys doing the things that we've been talking about. So I can totally agree with that. And taking, it doesn't matter what sport you're in, as long as you know that you're encouraging these kids to do better, not only in sports, but in life. That's the biggest portion. So that's awesome. Again, I think you and I have the same kind of thought process when it comes to this. So,
well, now you're talking
go ahead.
about the score of 3-0, right? That's what's so wonderful about sports is there's life lessons, right?
Yep.
Whether they're up 3-0 or down 3-0. I mean, it sounds very cliche-ish, but there'll be times in your life you're up 3-0 and you think things are great, and they can turn on a dime, or the opposite, right? You just got to keep pushing. You got to keep grinding,
That's right. So coaching has taken you some places. I mean, were you ever in a position where you were just like, nope, I'm good, I don't want to coach anymore? And I kind of ask athletes this a lot too, where you think you wanted to hang your coaching hat up and kind of be done with it. Did you ever have a moment, that things got kind of rough in any coaching position where you're just like, nah, after this year, I'm good. But then you decided not to?
Well, and I'll tell you, just you were talking earlier. One of the things that popped into my head was I take the word coach very seriously. I take that title very seriously. I hate when, now, don't get me wrong, you get volunteer guys and they're called coach. I think they've earned that because they're putting in the time trying to help. But when you get, we talked about that I'm doing some recruiting stuff. A lot of people call themselves a coach, right? And they don't even know the daggone game. I mean, just from a fan perspective, and that drives me crazy. but I take the title coach very seriously. And I got to tell you, I did get out of it for a little while, completely. And that was because of the politics involved in it, and you're getting, I mean, there's some stories I don't even want to get into, but you get people hired as certain positions based off of some very seedy things.
Yeah.
And it really soured me because, you're like, this person's supposed to be a leader of young men. Because at the time I was coaching football, it's like, this is not a leader of young men. So, like I said, there's things that you could look back and say you regret or don't regret. I mean, I may not have done the same thing if I go back and did it again, but I don't regret it.
Right.
I just, so I did get out of it for a while. Actually, wrestling was what brought me back into coaching. So,
no, good. Nice.
So that's another beautiful thing that wrestling has given to me is brought me back into it. I get a guy that I coach at the high school level. I started a couple of programs here in Texas, a couple of high school wrestling programs, and one was at a military academy. Nice. And the kid's out of Oklahoma. So actually, that's check this out. So we got kids from all over the world, and I struggled for a while to try to get. I was coaching football there. It's here where I live now, but my wife's from this area, so I said I want to get back into coaching. So I coached football over there. Man, I struggled and struggled and struggled trying to get them to start a wrestling program. And all of a sudden, somebody knew a guy named Jesus Wilson. He's a Cuban refugee, and actually, there's a match with him against Brands at one of the.
Oh, really?
I think it might have been Pan Am's or something. There might even have been the trials here because he came to the U.S. Mm-hmm. So somebody found out about him that, hey, and this guy, he's training for the Olympics and everything else. So they said, we're going to start a wrestling program because we've got this guy. I'm like, hey, man, we've had a guy, right? So Jesus does this thing for a year, kind of gets some kids together. And then I take it over. And it was so cool because we had kids from Oklahoma, Ohio. We had one kid, Pennsylvania, who didn't stay long. We had a kid from Alaska, and we put this team together. We put a home duel together. We dragged the mats into the gym, and it was really neat, right? And we ended up beating a team that was, I wouldn't say they were a powerhouse or that great, but they were in our area. They were considered one of the better teams. So we beat them in this duel, and I'm like, hey, we're just getting started. Yeah. So then Christmas break happens. The kid from Alaska, one of the kids from Ohio, like 3 other kids, they don't come back to this military school. And it's like, wow. But we had 2 kids. We ended up going to state. We placed 8th in state that first year. We had 2 kids finish runner-up. And both of those kids I ended up taking to senior nationals.
So, nice. Very cool.
It was when it was in Pittsburgh. So
yeah. Very cool. So you found a moment, and then obviously some redemption. Wrestling brought you back in. So when you're on this path, how long had you been thinking about doing a book? Like where did this start to enter?
So the book stuff, you'll find this funny. The book stuff started probably over about 10 years ago.
Okay.
I used to tell my mother these stories about, kids say the darndest things, right?
Yeah.
About adults saying dumb things like an ovulating fan instead of an oscillating fan, right? And I would catch these things. So I would tell my mom, so she'd get a real kick out of this. And so she ended up getting sick, and I went and stayed with her in the hospital, and we were just talking one day. She said, so by the way, I would write these things down because I would forget half of them.
Yep.
And I'd be like, Mom, I had something funny to tell you. I forgot. So I just started writing them down.
Yeah.
And so we just started going through them one night just to laugh, some levity in the whole situation. And she said, you should put that in book form and publish it. And so when she passed away, I said, I'm going to do that for my mom. And so that was my first book. It's called Relative Genius. So it's kind of twofold meaning, right? It's because a lot of it's my wife's family. They're our relatives, right? Yep. But people think they're so intelligent, use big words, and then they use them incorrectly, right? So There's over, I think there's 120 of them in this book. It's just a real silly book, but that's when I did that. I did a book on the Southeastern Conference football wise.
Yeah.
And as I'm preparing for that, I'm working out one night and I'm on the elliptical. It's dark all around and it was late, but I just kept thinking about people in my life that are successful. I mean, to me, they're successful because they make an impact for the people around them. They're happy with what they're doing. If they wanted to go on a small vacation, they had money to do it. They weren't super wealthy, but they were doing well.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a book called Unveiling Success, because to me, success isn't about money and fame and power. Success is about being content with who you are and what you do.
Correct.
And so I wrote about 10 people that I knew that kept popping in my mind. So in the in between time of writing that next book, I wrote a book on unveiling success. And to get to your point about wrestling, I always I know how great wrestling is. I think anybody that gets into it knows that it's one of the best pursuits that you can be involved in as far as personal development. And so I always knew that I wanted to shout from the rooftops, what good wrestling can do for people. And so just wasn't sure when that would be. I was actually going to write a book on adaptive athletics. But we went out to the U.S. Open in 2022 and helped coach some guys out there. And I just said, you know what, now's the time to do. I started talking to more and more people that I was going to do this book.
Yeah.
And I just said, now's the time to do it. And so that's where the whole wrestling book came in. And I knew I was going to do one eventually, just wasn't sure. And I think probably the U.S. Open 2022 is what spurred it to be as soon as it is.
So folks, by the way, go check out the other books as well. Not only we talk about Matt Return, but go check out the other books too, because those actually sound pretty good. I'm gonna go look at those now.
So
I had no idea.
I mean, just a shameless plug here. You can just go to Amazon, type in Ron Lang, and it'll bring up the books that I published.
All the stuff that you got. Awesome. Yeah. Literally so like I told you, because I have the book, but I can't sit down and do that. So I'm at a computer screen all day. So I always have the book pulled up on my computer screen going through and reading. So you've done a couple books. So before this book, you've got experience now, like you're the writing person. Cause I was going to ask you a little bit, like what is when you decide to write a book, what is your method how do you write? Like, what is your method of putting things down that are up here down to there? Obviously I know you guys have editors and they have people that help, with the book itself, but your idea, putting it down on paper, is it because you just said that, you wrote this stuff down because you forget, but when you're in the act of actually writing the book, how are you writing that book? What is your process?
So I really love that you asked that question. So I have my process so the success book was really, let me talk to the people that I continue to think about.
Yeah.
And let me get their story. And I learned a lot about them and some of their things. Like my brother-in-law was one of them. He retired as a chief master sergeant out of the Air Force.
Dang.
Okay. But I learned that he was at Mount Pinatubo when it exploded last. Before the base was closed down. So they had a typhoon come in, and right after that, the volcano erupts. And so there's blankets of ash just falling, and they're like crushing cars. I mean, some people even died, everything.
Oh my God.
His family was there. They evacuate. He stayed behind as part of the I guess you call it the cleanup crew to secure the area. And that was something I knew, the way he lives his life and the things that he's done in his life, he was successful. But I had no idea that he was there at that time.
Right.
So that was a cool story that unveiled itself,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Keep going.
I was just going to say, I think I have a unique process because I really just have a concept of what I want to do, and I let the story write itself.
Okay.
So like when I was at these Southeastern Conference campuses, I knew that I wanted to get around and see the campus, talk about the culture, the traditions and things like that. But things present itself, right? So like an older couple that's been to, 200 straight games or something, or,
Yeah.
one time, this is before I wrote the book, my first game I took my wife to was a Texas A&M football game. And there was an older couple, and this lady was rubbing her rabbit's foot before every
boy.
play. Right. So the story writes itself. And I knew here, because all 50 states in the United States are represented in this book.
Yep.
I knew that I had to keep it an open mind, because, you can't search for certain stories. You have to let it come to you. And then as you talk to people, and I use it like the story writes itself. And I joke around with words like, I romanticize it a little bit. Right. But, and you and I talked about this, the beauty of people's stories is the humanity in it, the personalization of it. And so why mess with that? Right. I mean, just be real and true. The story presents itself. And so I kind of reorder it. Right. And this book, I mean, there's different categories, different chapters, things like that. But the stories themselves, they really kind of write themselves. Right. I mean, let people know about others. And I mean, I'm not the one. I didn't come up with those people's story. They're just telling me their story, and I'm able to transition it into a part of the book that makes sense.
So I think with the humanity portion, because we talk, obviously it's about wrestling, and I think, and maybe you agree, but I think wrestling presents the most high of highs and the most low of lows. Because as you explain in your book, this is an individual sport as much as it can be a team sport at the same time. There's different angles to everything when it comes to that, but ultimately it is one person against one person. Sometimes you got to be 10 points ahead of the ref, but it's one person versus one person. And that's all you have. That's all you had to go by are the skills that you were taught. And because you have to think in fast pace, you have to, so humanity, I think the humanity level of it is just knowing that these people went through these struggles and they survived and they made it through. And it's not like they were down in the dumps and just, I wish back in 88 in high school, I would have won that state championship. I'd have a better job. No, these people are persevering through things and sometimes it's not even the sport that brought them down. It was a personal experience that happened while they're in that sport that brought them down a little bit. But then because they were surrounded by good teammates, humanity, they're surrounded by good coaches, humanity. Everything around them had to be human produced in order to bring things either back to life or at least back to level, right? And I think that is the biggest, like I said, that's the biggest thing I take away from all of it is that every single person in here has a struggle or an accomplishment, a high that, they won this big tournament and they worked so hard to get there and they sacrificed time and hours to get there. There's a human level to every single thing that goes on through this book. That is, I think, like we said, is like the biggest portion of this book. The stories are great. I mean, the people you talk about from John Smith to Pestrikov, there's all these different guys that you talk about with coaches. There's all these different athletes that are in there. And I mean, I think we've had a couple of them on the show that you talked about, certain things like that. So when you're going through that process, especially with this book, were you traveling? I mean, so you spoken to certain people. Like, I don't think I can sense through each story that you were there with that person. How much were you traveling to get this?
A good amount. I took a lot of time from work. It took me about a year and a half to research and write the book. It's so closer to 2 years, but a year and a half strictly focusing on that. And it was with travel. I would try to, obviously put cities together in terms of, or events, right? So there, at one point I went down, I went to University of Georgia's wrestling club. They had a tournament going on while I was there. So, I hit Ironclad in Alabama. I'm at UT Chattanooga. I'm there. From there, I worked my way up. I went to University of Michigan. I was at Ohio State. Went over and saw Rob Waller in Pennsylvania. Excuse me. And so, I'm trying to tie all those together and be efficient with it, right? Because it was on my own time and my own dime. but I felt that it was important to be at as many places as I could. You mentioned John Smith. John Smith he was phenomenal. Like I went down and he made time for us. I think John Smith's one of the coolest. I'd never met him before, and he's one of the coolest guys. I mean, he's like, "Hey, you want to set up a camera? I'm like, "No, we just talk, right?"
Yeah.
So we just walk around the facility. We go into a room, sit on some couches, and talk. And and I'm glad I brought him up because to me, he's just real, right? I mean, he's a real guy, and that's where these stories for me, the humanity comes out because it is real. I mean, these are real people, real stories. I'm not fabricating. And to be honest with you, I don't think you could fabricate story. Like, I mean, I could probably make up a story, but I mean, what's the point? I mean, there's so many people that are being influenced by wrestling and are doing good things and improving themselves from the sport. You don't have to make things up, right? So there was, unfortunately, I didn't get to go out to Hawaii. The people there, the people that are represented from Hawaii. Well, you mentioned Petrikov, Alaska would have also been good, but a lot of these people you meet up with, like at the U.S. Open or some of these national tournaments, so I didn't visit all 50 states, but I mean, I truly did talk with multiple people from all 50 states, and it was really cool.
So with your travels and things like that, like what did you find to be your most challenging, and not even just on because they were hard to interview, what was the most challenging interview that you had as far as getting to them to finally getting to be able to either sit down or video or whatever? Who's the most kind of like, I guess, busy, for lack of a better term, type person to interview?
Man, I don't know, probably, and I hate to say this, I don't want it to sound like a bad lie, but Chase Pammy out in Vegas, at Gold Rush. But Chase is an awesome dude. I mean, and the funniest thing is, I had a hard time pinning him down. I'm even out there for 2023 U.S. Open in Vegas. I went to his place. I mean, he's so busy. He's working with so many kids, and they were looking for a different place at the time. And I saw him quickly at the event, right? He had some kids at the U.S. Open. So I saw him quickly. And then the funniest thing about it is when it was all said and done, I published it. I'm at Tulsa Nationals in January. It might have been there in February, but I'm at Tulsa Nationals and he's there with a bunch of kids and we see each other about 18 times. That would have been nice when I was trying to pin you down for an interview, right? But so probably Chase, but it wasn't, he wasn't trying to avoid it, but he's just so busy.
Speaking of that, I thought you were going to say it was Mike Krause, because that dude was everywhere. The late great, that guy was everywhere. Yes. So I started a tournament in the Valley here called Sawdust Nationals. And the first year that we had it at UWO. And I think I posted something about it, and he's like, "Hey man," he's like, "you need a clinician for before the tournament." And I was like, "I don't even know who this guy is, but I see him a little bit on Instagram." I was like, "All right, let's see what's going on," and pulled it up, and he was just watching videos of him. The guy is everywhere. And you have obviously you talk about him in the book. And to me, that's why I was kind of curious, because some of these guys are just so busy, but they're not just busy, they're active. Like they like doing what they're doing, like in that capacity.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Krause was, I mean, as you know, he's energy, right? Like he's always, I mean, just, he never stops.
Never.
What a shock. I mean, so I don't know if you've seen this lately. I don't know what this whole new trend is about posting that people passed away, celebrities. I've seen this a lot this past week, and it's just a hoax, right? But this was before that is when Krause passed, and honestly, I mean, it took me by surprise. I'm like,
yes, is
this a hoax?
I agree. Yeah,
I mean, I was like, it just didn't make sense.
No,
but one thing I wanted to say about that, and so when he passed, obviously it was a sad moment. It wasn't good, but I was honored to have him in the book. He was honored to be in the book. I was I was really pleased. Like, he made time because he thought it was an honor, and he knew that this was about growing the sport of wrestling. And
Yes.
he was really dedicated to doing that himself.
Wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly.
So,
If that guy was given a cape, then we told him, hey, go spread the good word. He would have been all over the world if he had the option to do it. I mean, that guy was crazy energy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, and I loved it. And so for me, what I always, every one of these stories I would send to people. Now, that was a hard part too. I would send them to get verified. Really, I didn't send it for people to rewrite it the way they wanted. I sent it like, this is what I'm writing. Are the facts correct? Right?
Yes.
Like, did I misinterpret anything? I need to make sure we're legit here, right?
Yeah.
Some people would want to do little rewrites. You know, like, so Krause is one of them, but he didn't want to rewrite, like, make me that superhero you're talking about. His rewrite was, hey, at the end, can you put that Mike Krause brings the heat all the time? And I'm like, of course I can, because that was kind of one of his things. So I think about it. Not only was I proud to have him in it when he passed, and I was like, Coach, I was thinking to myself, I was like, Coach, you're bringing the heat, man. You're always going to bring the heat in the book.
Everywhere. It's hot in heaven right now because that guy's running practice.
But so it's kind of a legacy for that his story is in here, and Mike Krause brings the heat. So like, it's all. I'm so glad that he wanted to do that little rewrite. Because we've got it. Hey, you're always bringing the heat, Mike Krause. There you go, bud.
Always. And that was the best thing about him. He did the same thing at the tournament, man. And I funny story about him, because the university was closed at the time. It was off school hour or off school time. And they had dorms open that we offered up to some of the families. Like, if you didn't want to pay for a hotel room, there are some of these dorm rooms that you could do, that you could have. And I told Mike, I was like, hey, we got these dorm rooms that are in the university. I was like, do you guys want to stay there? He's like, absolutely not. He's like, I'm bringing my wife. There's no way she's going to be staying in those dorm rooms at all. He goes, she would have my head on a platter if I put her in a dorm room. He was like, I already got a hotel. I'm set. And I was like, all right, man, just trying to help out a little bit. So make sure you're all set. But man, he didn't even care. As soon as I walked in, he goes, hey man, thanks for offering up that room. He goes, my wife still would have chopped my head off. She was right back there handing out pamphlets and stuff. She was right there with him. I mean, talk about a dynamic duo. I mean, those guys were traveling, spreading everything they could about getting these kids into wrestling, and the energy that they can bring is like, holy cow. But so,
at the end of the day, like you said, you put a cape on him because of all of his effort. But at the end of the day, the thing that I appreciated the most about him, and I appreciate probably the most about anybody, is when you're just real and true. And there was no person more real than him. He just gave you who he was.
He didn't hide it, because what you saw in the videos, you saw the same thing if you're in front of him. It didn't matter. It was the same thing. So that was awesome. That was when I first started reading, I saw he was in there. I was like, man, this guy is going to be remembered forever, as he should be, because man, talk about an icon of the sport. So as you're kind of going through and you're writing the book and you're getting stories together, were you ever kind of stuck where you're like, man, I don't feel like I have enough, I got to go get more? When did you find that you're like, I'm good, this is enough for a book? Like, because there's so many more people you could reach out to. I mean, you have all these connections too. So where was your mind where a stopping point would be?
So I initially was only going to do one representation from every state. And then I quickly realized that, I mean, that's just, if I did 10 representations in some states, or 10 examples, 10 stories out of, I mean, just to throw Pennsylvania out there, right?
Yeah.
You're just scratching the surface. But I couldn't have 10 in Pennsylvania and then one in Nevada. And so I started saying, okay, because then people started bringing stories to me and people to me. And I said, well, I have to have multiple. So there's at least 2 from every state.
Yeah.
And, but you're so right. I continue to think, and I'm introduced to more and more people and more stories here lately. So I'm like, maybe there's a sequel in the mix.
I was just going to ask that. Is there a volume 2 coming? Like,
I think there's almost going to have to be, right? But My initial plan. So as you know, there's a standalone chapter for women's and girls wrestling in the book.
Yes. Yep. Correct.
And there's representation throughout the book. So it's not just that one chapter. I mean, the attributes that wrestling provides isn't just for men or males, it's for females. So there's female representation throughout the book, and there's a standalone chapter. And I say that because I envisioned the next book to be strictly on female wrestling. So I don't know if that's the way it's going to be, or if it'll just be, a sequel that has maybe some more female. Although there's a lot of female representation, but
for sure. But now, I mean, having written the book, what year did you actually start writing the book? It was 10 years ago you started?
Well, no, 10 years when I started the writing process, like
the concept,
telling my mother all those things.
And, yeah.
But it's really been longer than that, right? In terms of even writing this book or the SEC book, like it's been a lifetime, or since I started.
Yeah.
For me, the Southeastern Conference, I was a Southeastern Conference fan at 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
I remember 1980 watching Herschel Walker play. So, I mean, it's kind of a lifetime of memories, traditions, things. Wrestling, obviously, I didn't start for another 10 years after that, but it's a compilation of the people I've met through the sport, my own experiences, the kids I've coached, seeing different things, families, how they are, going to tournaments and seeing people from around the country. So in a sense, I mean, it has been since I started the sport, right? And knowing what that does for me and the teammates I had in high school, just throughout the life lessons that it teaches, and seeing that over and over and over again puts my mind in a mindset, right? So where I know that this is, and that was the purpose of the book, right? Like, I could write about wrestling stories, but the purpose is, man, people need to know how great the sport is.
Yes.
If you stay in this sport for, say it's one season, as long as you don't quit during the middle of the season, if you give it a try, I promise you, at some point in your life, you're going to overcome something, or you're going to accomplish something, and you're going to say, at least part of that was from things that I learned during wrestling.
So I just brought that up to an athlete on our soccer team the other night. Not an awesome soccer player, but the kid goes out and gives it his all, right? When you put him out and I tell him what position, he may not even know how to play it properly, but I know he'll go out and he'll play hard, right? So we're talking a little bit after the game. Our JV tied, and I was happy with that because I think we'd been getting beaten by like 5-0, 6-0, 8-1, things like that. But talking to him out to the side a little bit, and he was bringing up that he was going to be joining the Air Force. And I was like, interesting. You're not in the greatest shape on the planet, and you're going to have to go through some basic training when you get there, no matter what. It's like, hey, have you thought about joining wrestling at all? It's like, it would help you on your journey if that's what you, because I think he's a senior this year. I said it would help you on your journey, kind of prepping for that. I said, don't even worry about the wins. Go there for the conditioning. Go there for the getting into shape and build some character. You might find a little bit about yourself when you're wrestling. He goes, I think I might do that. I might do wrestling this year. His grandmother coaches or taught Muay Thai. I was like, you already have like the background in the family. I was like, what? You shouldn't even be worried about it, So he's like, I might look into that. I might join some wrestling. And so in contrast of what you were kind of talking about, the timeline is, especially with the female wrestlers, that it's grown. We talk about growing the sport, and honestly, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face until I go in my grave, that if it was not for girls wrestling and women's wrestling, men's wrestling could possibly be in the tank right now. So with that thought is just how much more now that women's wrestling has grown, and the stories that have now built because of that time frame, and all of the accolades that a lot of these women athletes, Kylie Welkers, Helen Marolis, and all those guys that have now come up, Adeline Gray, those stories that are out there that can help, like you said, grow the sport even more, because every one of these guys that has a story, I mean, you talk to people that wrestled and they don't do anything in wrestling anymore, but it was a part of their life that got them through again, the humanity part of I struggled at work, but I knew that if I just got down and ground through it, I would be successful. And they wound up being some of the top people in the company that they're at, or they wound up being successful at the business that they decided to run because of that grit. And that's also part of something in the book is grit. That's to me, it takes a lot of time and effort, and not only just grit, but it takes a lot of personal perseverance to be able to get through writing a book. Because I'll tell you what, just trying to write a paper as a high school kid, and even writing something now, it's not easy. So what was the biggest challenge of the book itself and pushing through some of the writing of the book? Did you think that everybody worries about if someone's going to like it, but were you kind of like, I don't know if people are going to really buy this and buy into it, which everybody I've talked to so far, I know has it, and they think it's a great read. So where were some of the challenges you found?
So the biggest challenge for me was with over 150 stories, getting them out, getting those folks to read it and to quote unquote verify it. So I had I kind of had my schedule, and then I would have all this listed out.
Yeah.
And then I knew that I had to start breaking it down in chapters because just like wrestling itself, right? So as you see in the book, there can be thousands of attributes from wrestling, virtues, values that you draw from wrestling. So I break that down, and then each chapter talks about 3 of them, or it talks about an age group. And so the 2 biggest challenges for me were where do I put these stories? Is it in, is it an age group category, or is it in a virtues or values category? Some of them, they have multiple ones, but then I also didn't want to have, say 2 from the state of Iowa together in the same chapter. So I was going to break that up. The other thing, but the verifying the stories, getting people to understand that I'm on a timeline, and I'm sorry, but it's not your timeline. I need you to read these 3 paragraphs and tell me if it's factual the way I think it is. And so, and people are busy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they're out watching TV and ignoring it, but to get all of those back and say, hey, you're good here, or like there was one, for instance, they felt like I kind of missed the point. It was a family and some coaches and a parent.
Sure.
I said, okay, that it was about a kid, and the kid was like, I don't know if that's really what I meant. Okay, no problem. Let's do it again. And because I wanted it to be real, and I wanted them to be happy with it. And when I say real, at this point in time, real is big for me. Like it has to be real and true.
Yeah, I agree.
But at the same time, like my hand could be real, and you could say, oh, well, your thumb's bent or whatever. But in my mind, I might be thinking something else. So for this kid, especially being a high school age kid, I want it to represent the way that she wanted it to be represented. So I wanted it to be real in that manner too.
Understood. And we talk about growing the sport. If you gave this book, and I'm going to attest to it this way, if you gave this book to a kid who knows nothing about wrestling, right? Because it's not like you're not, the book isn't going through terminology and talking about, that kind of thing. It's the stories that involve the sport itself. If you gave this book to a 5th grade kid and you said, hey, read this story right here, that kid could possibly, and I don't care what sport he joined, he could use that story right there and be like, oh, I can do this. I am capable of doing this. And so growing and
said that.
And they could jump into wrestling because of it. So it's growing the sport that way. But at the same time, it's also growing kids' confidence in themselves within the sport and life, just like we keep talking about. So it was, were you kind of seeing that vision as you're putting these stories together? Like, man, if I was a kid right now and I read this would, I'd go through a brick wall for someone right now,
Definitely. And to be honest with you, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I guess you'd call it my elevator speech or my tagline when I approach people, talk to them about being in the book and all that. They were like, well, some people, of course you're going to get mixed reviews, right? Some people are like,
sure.
I'm not sure. Well, what do you mean? And how are you going to grow wrestling? And other people would be all for it. But this was my vision. My vision was this. At the end of the day, I said, if nothing else comes of this, this will make this book a success. And that is, if a club coach or a high school coach could take my book and say, hey, Susie, Johnny, Mom, Dad, you all read any chapter out of this book and tell me why you wouldn't try wrestling. Then we're good. I'm a success. I'm happy. Then it's done its job. And so at the end of the day, that's my thing. I think you could choose any chapter. Now, the secret to that is I'm Johnny, and I'm going to look at the table of contents and I want to see something that sticks out to me. So it is going to be prevalent whatever chapter they read.
Yeah.
But I challenge anybody at all. You may never heard of wrestling and you may not, or you may dislike wrestling. I challenge anybody to read this book or a portion of it and number one, say it's not entertaining. Number two, say it's not inspirational. I mean, number three, say it's not motivational. I mean, it's because it's real people doing great things in a difficult sport. So
yeah. I mean, no, and I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that we kind of talk about the fact that this isn't a book that's written in succession. Like you put it together, you still have to, you had a rhyme and a reason of how you wanted things to be in here, but you don't have to read story 1, story 2, story 3, story 4. Yep. You can read story 1, then you can go to story 20. You can come back and go to story 12. So this book is a book to be able to go and literally inspire yourself. Like you said, you could go to a chapter within here. If you like what that chapter says, just the title of it, you could go right to it and start reading it. Yep. So that's what makes to me that, because of the attention span that I have and the things that I have to do, that's also what makes this book so much easier than reading a Stephen King book that you have to keep track of what's going on throughout. Yeah. If you can't read 4 paragraphs in a row, you have a problem, because this is exactly what this is for, to read the story, take something from a story, whether you can apply it to yourself or you start applying it to yourself. You could go to another story and do the same thing. You don't have to go in succession. So that I as a reader can appreciate that in the way that it takes you through. So with putting the book together, you have to sell a book. Right? You have to be able to market, and you have to be able to not just have it on Amazon, but you got to put it out there. But you've partnered up with some really great people out there. I mean, we're talking about, Rudis, and there's a couple other ones that you had to, who are your shirts made by again? Blue Chip?
Cliff Keen.
Yep. That's right. Yep. So you partnered up with some really good people to get this put together. So talk about the aspect of getting the book out there. Now you got it all together, you got your stories together. What was that like, trying to get this marketed? You've done other books before, so you kind of knew, but we're talking about the wrestling community. This is a little different.
So that's the hardest thing. I mean, some people probably think that in high school I like writing term papers and all that. Yeah. No, I was the type of kid that, it's due tomorrow at 8 a.m. Okay, it's midnight. I better start writing this thing. And that's how I was. But the hardest part of this whole thing is the marketing and getting the word out there. And you can say what you want. And people always say, well, it's up to you. No, it almost in any endeavor other than wrestling, you rely on others. You have to.
You got it.
And so that's been some of the frustrating parts for me, is that, this one says we'll do this and we'll do that, and we have all these numbers, and don't you worry, we've got you in this state. And that hadn't been the case. But I mean, not here to be negative, throw stones, but
no.
We have to get the word out. I think part of it is I had a very prominent club coach. If I told you his name, you'd know. But he says, I saw him at NCAAs this past year. He says, people don't want you to make money. So, I'm here to say this. I'm not on the positive side whatsoever. I'd love to break even eventually, but that's not even the point. I'm just telling you, because I just tell you what's up.
Yep.
What this is about is getting the word out to help grow the sport, because like I said, in the end of the day, you can give this to somebody that's just thinking about wrestling.
Correct.
Or even if they knew nothing about it, and say, like you're talking about this kid that's going in the military, there's a story in here, and I'm glad I kind of got back to this. And I actually talked to the high school coach today, right? There's a story in here about a Navy SEAL. I don't know if you've gotten to it yet.
I'm gonna let you
This
tell
high
it either way.
So this high school coach that I talked to today was a GA for Gable in the late 70s at Iowa.
Okay.
And so I talked to him and he tells me about this kid. He said he wasn't very talented, but he was the hardest working kid I've ever had, bar none, bar none. Turns out that this kid becomes a SEAL, and he didn't become a SEAL right away. He struggled. He went through some struggles, not getting through the first BUDS test and all that.
Yep.
So his name's not revealed in the book because he's still active.
Yep. Yep.
But here's one thing I want to say. What was really cool, this high school coach I talked to today, which was his high school coach, he told me this story. So it wasn't this past year, 2023, at Virginia Beach. He takes some kids there, and here they are advertising. You want to be a SEAL, want to be a Marine, because they know wrestling will. I mean, what great recruits for that,
right?
So he goes up to the Navy guys, and they're talking about being a SEAL and everything else. And he says, "Hey, do you know so and so?" And they both stopped and looked at each other like, "How do you know him?" They were in awe of this guy because he's like one of in the SEAL community. Apparently, he's pretty well thought of. And like I said, I can't say his name because he's still active for his own safety.
Call him badass.
But yeah, he's the stud. Like he runs those ultra marathons and all those things. But and he wasn't even a good wrestler. I mean, and I think that's also important to say. It's like you do not have to. I mean, obviously, there's nothing wrong with wanting to achieve success and be at the top of the mountain. But you do not. I mean, you and I just talked about it earlier, right? About our own high school careers. Yep. You don't have to be Jordan Burroughs to draw from this sport.
Not at
you
all.
Will benefit. You, as a matter of fact, the average wrestlers probably benefit from the sport more than the better wrestlers.
Yes,
I would surmise. So, and I'm sorry, I kind of went away from your question there. I mean,
it's all good,
but it's. I think I was talking about, forget the money part of it. I want this book to be something. You're talking about marketing, right?
Marketing, yep.
The word needs to get out. This is not about money. This is about shouting from the rooftops how great the sport is. It's we all know it, but what do we want? We want to change it to be MMA. Let's get Ferrari and Starace to forget all that. Forget all that.
Yeah, that's for them.
It's never going to be as popular as football. Forget all that. I don't care.
Yep.
But let it. I mean, and you brought up women. So here's my deal, man. Honestly, check this out. Just be who we are, right? I used to tell my kids I was coaching or in recruiting, helping them out with coaches. They're like, "Coach, what do I say to this coach? What do I do?" Just be yourself. Be who you are. If you want to find a girlfriend or a boyfriend, my advice to them would be who you are. If they don't like you for that, it's not going to work out anyway.
Correct.
Just be who you are, and then you'll be happy too. So like us as wrestlers, let's be who we are, man.
Yeah.
We have the most transformative sport in the world. And it has ever been and as ever will be. So let's stop trying to change it to be something else.
Yep.
We don't have to be the most popular. We're never going to be MMA. We're never going to be NFL. And that's okay.
Agreed.
That's okay. Agreed. Let's be who we are. And I think the best example is this. When we started opening the doors to have women wrestle in their own divisions, guess what happened? We were all surprised by a lot of things. Number one, that so many girls wanted to try it. But number two, they just fell in love with the sport.
Almost instantly.
Yes.
Almost instantly. Look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. We
didn't have to change it to do anything. Nope. Just let them have an opportunity, and the girls fell in love with it. And what more could you ask for? That's why we wanted to open it up to you guys, to give you an opportunity to compete against other females.
Yes.
And try it. And you tried it and you liked it. We do these girls, it's not the fastest growing sport because we're forcing them to be in it.
Correct.
Falling in love with it. And as a parent, as a coach, what more could you want than your kid or your athlete to just love the sport? How great is that?
Right. And it's the simplicity of the sport is what really brings out. I mean, you're talking about one-on-one, like we said before, the simplicity of the sport will bring out who you are. So if you're someone that's trying to hide it on the outside, once you get on that mat, you show out exactly who you are. You know, you either got it or you don't. And then if you come back the next round, you show how much hard work you're putting into it, and you show exactly everybody that you're made for it. Because there's no hiding anymore. You have to put that work in.
How about the women's wrestling? And I think this is the craziest thing. Like where we come from, right? We see it all the time, and it's still hard for us to fathom. But girls will go out there and fight tooth and nail with each other.
Yes.
And then as soon as the whistle blows, they're not even off the mat. They're hugging each other, darn near asking for their phone number. They're best of friends.
That's right. That's right.
That's crazy, but it's cool, right?
That's right. And it's done that since at the dawn of time, I think, with the sport. If you look at the international style, same thing. You know, these guys going over to foreign countries, these guys we're bringing some of those guys back here. You know, they're coming here and they're creating U.S. relationships. Our guys are going over there and creating foreign relationships. And honestly, I mean, other than soccer, I can't think of a more worldwide sport.
So I was actually going to bring that up, right? I'm going to turn the tables on you and ask you a question.
Yeah.
So I think like growing the sport, there's so many things that we can do to grow the sport. I talk about the book, like let's just get the book out there so people know exactly what this sport's all about.
Yep.
But as far as growing or improving the sport, however you want to look at it, I mean, so I bring that up when you say soccer and your experience in soccer.
Yeah.
Don't we need to go back to having what I call friendlies, right? Let's have some duels, some home and away duels with
that don't matter. Yeah, there's nothing tied to it. It's just going out and enjoying the sport. Because I remember as a kid, now we can talk about the high school level here, because if I ask a varsity player to jump down and play to JV, oh no, I wouldn't. No way, I can't play JV. These chicks are not going to be impressed with me if I go down to JV. I had to explain to kids this recently. I said, look, this is a team sport. We're here to get better. Mm-hmm. You coming down, I'll tell you this much, you probably sit half the game anyways on varsity. Why don't you come down to JV with some of these guys who are going to be coming up to varsity with you next year, get better, and we'll play a friendly little scrimmage. We'll all play together. Like you said, we'll get Kakana down the road, and we do it. I think we do it every year. We scrimmage with those guys just to play. When I was a kid, I didn't care where I played. I just wanted to play. And I think, like you said, with your book and people just reading into a couple chapters, if you're not like, hey, I want to turn on Flow Wrestling or go check out this Flow Wrestling stuff, or I want to go check out Rockfin or something like that. If you're reading this and not being at least inspired to go check it out, that there's something empty inside your head. Because these stories, like I said, there's perseverance, there's loss, there's wins, there's championships, there's all kinds of stuff that happen that you can't experience unless you either see it, read it, or go through it. And that's what I think is the magnificent thing about it that helps grow the sport, is because you're getting an angle of athletics and life that you can't get anywhere else. You can't duplicate wrestling. You can't duplicate what you get out of it, because it's just that unique. And the fact that the girls gravitated towards it, I'm talking about girls sports in general. I love watching girls soccer. They are tough, and it's not you bumped my shoelace and now I'm rolling on the ground stuff. It is, they're playing hard and they're playing physical and they're playing to win. I don't care what anybody's opinion is about the women's Olympic soccer team. First of all, ask me how many championships they've won. Then ask me how many championships the men have won. That's the kind of the grit and things like that women's sports has brought all the way through in a lot of sports. Now, I don't think that your book necessarily is like you said. You didn't just have like one whole big chapter on women's. You spread it out. You put one story was here, one because it correlated, or something with the message that was being put through. But then you did dedicate one specific area to it. I think with marketing, but like we were kind of touching on with the marketing portion, once someone sees in like the adversity that one girl goes through versus what one guy goes through, they could be like, whoa, man, I want to jump on board with this girl's version, because this could be even better than the normal version. So that the Talking About It Volume 2, Is that something, is that something that not just the girls side of it, but would you also want to be putting together something that's like maybe a freestyle kind of side of it, or like a Greco-Roman stories, or, things like that, where you're kind of breaking it up a little bit? Just an idea literally just popped into my head.
I was actually thinking the other day of how much I didn't have as much Greco as I wish I had in there.
Yeah.
I mean, which, by the way, I do want to say this. I think we need to stop undercutting each other in this sport. I
Agreed.
mean, we need to get on the same page and stop talking about style and why that's hurting us. I mean, I think it's ignorant to say, and there are a lot of prominent people who will disagree with me. I think it's ignorant to say, oh, we got to have the girls wrestle freestyle in college or they will never have a shot on the Olympic level. Like, that's a joke. Up until the Olympics this year, the men were outperforming the women.
Yeah.
Now we have folk style in high school. I mean, in college, excuse me.
Yeah.
What I don't like, I'll just say this. I see a lot of people based off of their own agenda have their opinions. My opinion is based off the agenda for girls. I talk to a lot of girls, and these women, once again, prominent names will tell you that, oh no, I never hear the girls want folk style. I talk to a lot of girls that want to. They're like, why can't I wrestle folk style in college? I mean, I have to switch over to this other style predominantly, and there are some folk style opportunities in college, but I guess my feeling is, I mean, yes, we all want to do well in the Olympics, but so are we going to sacrifice everybody but those 6 women? I mean, come on, man. I just, we can all live together, right? And Greco too. We can all live together and improve the sport, but we have to stop worrying strictly about ourselves.
Yeah.
We can't start clubs just so we can make money or we can pump our name out there, right? Someone told me, obviously you could tell I'm passionate about these things, but
yeah, it's all right. It's good.
So someone told me one time, and I thought it was pretty funny. Now, I don't think that this is a hard and fast 100% rule, right? Which not much is in this world other than, what do they say, death and taxes.
Yeah.
But they said, if you want to know about a club, just look at their name. If it's a person's name, it's about the person. If it's something else, it's about the kids.
Yeah, I agree.
And like I said, I don't think that that's 100%, because I see people's names on it that really do care about the kids.
For sure. Yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of a starting point, and you can look at that and go, oh, okay, well, this guy's got like his whole name there, even like
right on it. Yeah. Mike Krause is a prime example of not putting your name on it and being about the kids. I mean, I think everybody kind of knew that, but just personified that he loved the sport and that he loved making kids better. And actually, not even making kids better, making kids enjoy wrestling. Not if they got better, they should, because they're enjoying it, and that's usually how it goes, right? You don't think about it sucks so much, or you just think about how much fun you're having and you're getting better at it. And I think you make a good point. I think it's pretty valid to say that, you're pinning your name on something. You're not. I mean, it's a marketing ploy. I mean, if you're a big enough name, you put your name on something, it's going to sell something, right? Now, to a certain extent, I could argue that a little bit in our state with Askren a little bit, because not everybody that's coaching at Askren has their name as Askren, but in the same point of, there are quite a few clubs across the country where you can tell it's really just about them. It's about them, because then what happens once they're gone? They may be kids that gravitated towards them and thought they were great, but I can totally agree with that. So I
was going to tell you, Askren, he was one of the first guys I invited to talk about this book with. I saw him it was Folk Style Nationals. I think it was 2022. It was the year that they had the Bill Farrell there too. Remember that? Cedar Rapids, and they had the Farrell. So I had a guy at the Bill Farrell. And so, I mean, I love wrestling, so I'm watching the high school stuff too. And I just observed guys, right?
Yep.
And I knew who he was, but I mean, I'm observing guys and I'm watching him interact with others. So he tells me, I mean, long story short, just to give you the end game, but he tells me, hey, I'm busy, but he was super nice about it.
Oh, sure.
Professional about it. And I've respected him for just being honest and upfront with me. He's like, I just don't have time right now. But the reason I did is because I watched how he was with the kids, like not just the technical instruction, but just as you were saying earlier, right? You have an influence, whether you want to or not. These kids are watching you, right?
Yes.
And so
Correct.
I observed him, and he didn't know me. He didn't know I was observing him and others, right? But so that's another thing I do with the book, right? Like I can be fooled. People can be fooled, but I try not to just put somebody in there that's not worthy of their own salt, right? Worth their weight in salt. I mean, medals are all great and grand, but you can have and I mean, I don't want to be calling out people, right? But you can have some top names that really don't care. But then again, but I will call out somebody on a positive side, and that's Jordan Burroughs. Jordan Burroughs. Every dealing that I've ever had with this guy, he's been just a good human being. Now I know people give him grief over the whole thing at Penn State. I think that there's probably wrong on both sides, but he doesn't. For me, he doesn't get a pass because he's an Olympic champion. He's a great wrestler. I think that's a foolish take if you say, "Oh, it's okay to screw up because you were a great athlete." No, but he gets a pass for me because I've seen him do so much for the sport and so much for other people, even when he didn't have to. So I've seen the type of person that he is, and that's why he would get a pass, not because you have a gold medal. I mean, that really, in my mind, does not make you any better than anyone else as far as a person goes. Now, wrestler, yeah, you crush me in wrestling, but you're a good person because you're a good person. So
correct. So we're still a little bit of the marketing yet. What drove, what were your ideas because you did some giveaways, right? You're literally the first person that I've ever won a giveaway with on anything ever in my 45 years on this planet. And I get this package and I'm like, what? I message you. I'm like, hey dude, like what? Or no, you messaged me. You're like, hey, you won. I'm like, I won what, man? You're like, well, you won a shirt, stuff like that. I was like, dude, all I was doing is just trying to share. I was just trying to help out, put it out there. And you're like, no, you won. I was like, oh, all right.
So that's my thing, man. I people were entered by buying if they bought the book and showed me proof that they bought the book. I was like, okay, well, you're entered. If you did a review, if you did a post, I had a flyer that I had a lot of things backfire, but I did a flyer for this.
It's frustrating. I know. Yeah.
I get on USA. There's not really a lot of people, right? That's like, hey, here's a list of all the coaches. You can just send this out to every coach. I didn't really have support like that. And, but you can get on USA Wrestling and membership and you can find every club. So one by one, I sent out a message to every single club. Nice. It took me, it takes about a total of 3 days.
Wow.
Working constantly because there's like 7,000.
Yeah.
And so I sent out a message saying, this is my book. This is what I'm doing for the book. I'm having this contest. I'm working on the flyer, guys. Please get back to me individually and we'll work together. And I'll get you entered if you post a flyer in the room or you send it out by email to your wrestling community. Then I did it again. I got the flyer. I attached the flyer. Another 3 days, constant, just email.
Yeah.
I ended up getting about 20 responses
out of 7,000.
Yeah, 7,000 twice. Right, this is about 7,400.
Yeah.
And so someone tells me, "Hey, a lot of us don't look at our emails once the season's over with until we come back." And I'm like, man, I just spent basically a week sending emails constantly, almost for nothing.
Yeah.
But long story short, what I did is, I had these prizes. I did 50 prizes to represent the 50 states that are in the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was people leave a review, like you did, you posting good stuff. I mean, it was really easy to get an entry. It started out quick, like a lot of people did it, and then it really slowed down, like people weren't entering. But long story short, so I had 50 prizes, and they were from some of the companies that I have here in the book, right? That are called dedicated partners. But Cliff Keen, who's been around wrestling forever and supported wrestling, Rudis, Resolite's actually on the cover. So this is supposed to represent like a wrestling mat, right? And so Resolite did this mock-up for me, and then I said, I want your all's name on it too, just like it's a wrestling mat.
Right.
I was actually going to have these pictures surrounded, almost like at a duel, like a high school duel where kids.
Oh yeah, like mat. A team on one side. Yeah.
It would have been cool, but the shape of the book, right? It didn't really work that way. So
that's all right.
But
that's all right.
So long story short, I have all these Dopaminio. Footwork trainer. And so there were all these cool prizes. Resolite did some award mats. So those are still in the works. We're trying to get those out to people, but there were wrestling shoes, there were backpacks, headgear, t-shirts. There's a lot of cool stuff, right?
Pretty cool.
So we do this drawing the day that the Olympics, the wrestling in the Olympics finished up. And, you were one of them. I'm like, I mean, it was random. I did it on Instagram Live, and it wasn't, it was just everybody that you got an entry or two or three. I just threw it all in a box. And the only thing I was kind of hoping was maybe we don't have the same person. Like if they have multiple entries, I mean, I'm putting them in there. So I'm like, maybe we can not get one person, but unfortunately we didn't. But 27 states were represented with the winners.
Nice.
And then the cool part about that is I made it. I knew. So all those companies, what I did is they gave me some discounts. I bought all the stuff myself. Of course, then I had to pay for all the shipping and everything, which is another thing. But so I had some extra stuff. And I said, well, I want to do a bonus drawing for the states, the 3 states with the most entries per capita. So it's fair.
Right. Yeah. Yep. That's right.
So it's per capita. So like California had the most entries, right? But they also had the most people. So I just looked up. What I did was it might not have been the most recent numbers for the states, but I kept the source the same. So I mean, I kept the source the same. So I did all the states, their population, and everything, and I did my little formula, and then so those 3 states, and I can't remember. I think Montana was one of them, Alaska was one of them, and maybe it was North Dakota. I can't remember, but so those 3 states. The cool thing was nobody in the first 50 prizes won from those states. So when I did the bonus drawing, I put those entries back in for those states. And it happened to be one from each state, which was awesome. So
nice.
So there was actually 30 states that had prizes sent out to them.
That's cool. That's cool. And so to me, like that's also a part of the growing sport. Like as much that I don't get paid doing this. So literally I'm looking at thousands of dollars of equipment down here. Right. Like I spent my money on that because I feel like this is like doing this is my version of giving back to the sport. That's not only giving back to me, but giving back to my son and my family and both my sons. So that's, I completely empathize with the spending money on something to make sure that, cause you want to do it right and you want to represent correctly, just like everybody else when they're going on the mat, they're trying to represent correctly. So I think you're growing the sport just fine with what you're doing because you're giving back, you're showing that the sport does matter and that people in it matter. And at the same time though, too, that the stories matter. You know, everybody's been through something, everybody's been awarded something, whatever it is, but doing those prizes and kind of keeping people engaged. You might have engaged probably some new athletes, some new kids of the sport. And then now you just heightened it even more for those guys that they want to continue. Hey man, I gotta check out my Ruta socks. Look at these. I just got these, man. Like my parents are gonna keep buying me some. If we go to the next tournament, they're gonna give me another pair. So maybe that keeps them going and that keeps them driving through. So with the end goal of growing the sport, how, in your opinion, how do you feel? Like what's some feedback that you've gotten on the book?
It's all been very positive. Like people, I've been pleased. So I did get a few weeks back, somebody gave me a 4-star on Amazon. And it's really not a big deal, right? But it's like, dang it, I had all 5-star reviews, but they did not leave a review. It was just a rating.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I didn't know who it was or even why you would say only 4-star.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's no reason for me to worry about. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But it's like, hey, I wanted to keep my streak intact, right? 5-star.
That's the
But
wrestler inside.
the people I talk to, and they love the book, and they're like really shocked and surprised by what it really was. Like I told you, there were some people that were like, "What do you mean you're writing a book on wrestling? What is that about? What would that do? What is it about?" And they read, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's really cool and that's awesome."
Yeah.
So it has been really fun to get the positive feedback. But we just need to do more of it, right? Like people go on Amazon, they'll see, hey, it's a 4.9 star now instead of 5. But I mean, I know. Listen,
loser.
To me.
Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, right.
But no reason to complain. But the 22 reviews, and we get more reviews. People like that. Matter of fact, my wife was at a what do you call them? Like a convention for a work.
Yeah.
And Peyton Manning spoke, and she's standing next to they were actually front row, and she's standing next to Tennessee fans it was a bank. She works at a bank.
Okay.
And so she tells them about my book. Yeah, my husband wrote a book about the SEC, not to sell it, just to tell it. I'm in conversation.
Yeah.
So first thing they do is they get on their phone and they look it up, and they're like, oh man, those are good reviews. So, I mean, people see a lot of reviews, or they see, a good rating. It draws them to it. So, I mean, we could help with that. But one thing that I struggle with, and I don't know why this is so hard for people, but man, just email. Send it out to your email list of your wrestling community. Like just if anybody wants any information, so I'm at the.coachlang on Instagram. Just DM me. I'll send you pictures of the book. I'll send you flyers. I'll send you even a QR code if you want it.
Yeah.
So people can scan it and go to the book. Like, once again, it's not about money. Just like I say, I mean, I'd be a hypocrite to say, don't start a club only for money. And then I'd say, I'm writing a book just for money. Like that. What a hypocrite. But it's not about money. It's about growing the sport. And so if I can do anything for anybody to get information about this, because like you said, there are stories that somebody will relate to in here. I promise you. There's 150 different stories. People from Olympic champions down to 5-year-old kids, boys, girls, men, women. People will relate to these stories, and they'll see something in wrestling that I believe that will prompt most people to at least give it a try. So that's where, when I think about growing the sport, that's what, not everybody's going to stay in it, but there will be some that do, that stay with it.
That's correct.
And then think about this, like, what if we have somebody that joins the sport for 2 years and they get out of it, whether it be their last 2 years of high school or they go to another sport or whatever it is. But when they're older, right? I mean, I've really only wrestled 4 years, and look at the things that I'm doing for wrestling. And I probably do less than a lot of people in wrestling, but somebody joined wrestling and they see, that was 20 years ago, but my son's at a high school and they have a wrestling team. Hey, Johnny, you should try this. It's hard, but I mean, I loved it, and of course their history is probably going to be altered and they'll be like, I was the county champion or whatever.
right.
But I mean, people will go back to it. And you mentioned the women. How cool is it going to be when we get to a point where now we have more women coaches? Obviously, we're having more women wrestlers, but what about that? More women officials, which is growing now. But What about when we start having more women CEOs, more women business owners, and people that can give back to the sport that way because they were given an opportunity to participate?
Yep.
How cool is that going to be, right?
So, yeah. It's all going to pay off. It's going to pay dividends. And I think, honestly, with the way that the sport is going, I think anything and every little thing that in a positive nature that can help the sport it's all worthwhile. I think you brought up a good point. We do get lost in the, oh, I got to make money and doing this. I mean, don't get me wrong. Would a guy like to break even, like you said? Hell yeah. Why wouldn't you want to? Yeah. But when you are dedicated to something like this, and it's something that it's a passion, the money doesn't matter. Again, this is the side that I like doing. I like bringing these stories out to people, whether it's a wrestler's story. I mean, Nick Suriano hadn't talked to anybody in how long? And I was lucky enough to get him on to be able to tell his entire story about going all the way from little kid to the Penn State issue, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. I didn't know half of that stuff. And I think that having these stories out here like this as well, and even the stories that are nameless, like you said, the person's still active. You don't want to put that in jeopardy. It's still a story worthwhile, regardless, when it comes to this sport. So I commend you for what you're doing, and I know that things that we do in the future will definitely involve still putting that book out there, talking to kids, being like, hey, go grab this book. You don't even have to have the hard copy. Have it on your Kindle or on your tablet. You can read it right there. You can have it right there. So with that being said, I know we are going to be putting out a website pretty soon. We'd like to obviously incorporate that book onto there so people that are going can get more exposure to it. Because I have Vision Quest apparel company and stuff like that, but we're going to be putting some new stuff out there. So I'm definitely going to still be helping you put that out there because I think this book is extremely important. So here's the thing. We've been going
things, if you don't mind me saying,
go for it.
On the money part of it, one thing I'll say is profit's not a dirty word. I'm not against people making money, making profit. Yeah. I mean, if I did more than break even, I'd be happy about that too.
Sure. Yeah.
But so, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I don't want to make money, don't want to sell books. It's not, I guess my thing is it's the motivation behind it, right? Like my motivation to write this book was not to a get rich quick scheme or nothing like that. It was all about growing the sport. And, I assumed that I would probably make my money back on it. I mean, if that may or may not happen, and that's inconsequential. So I'm not trying to throw people under the bus for making money. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
It's really about the motivation, like especially when you take money from someone to teach their kid, and you do a phenomenal job of that, and you mentor them. Good for you, man. You deserve what you did, right?
Correct.
I mean, like I'm already at the point where I've put all this money and stuff into it, so it's not like it is what it is. So
yeah.
But once again, I'm sorry. I got to stop talking about the money because it doesn't matter.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
But I was going to say, like you're talking about these stories, like Lily Luft at Iowa.
Yep.
Man, her story is the longest one in the book. It's probably 3 stories worth of story. I mean, it's as long as 3 of them.
Yeah.
But once you read it, it really is 3 stories, and it's man, I encourage people to go look at her story. It's phenomenal. And
tough.
Man, they're some terrific people. People. So, I follow her on her stuff, and I like a lot of her stuff because
Same
just
here.
a good person, right?
Yep.
I mean, just awesome. And she wasn't even going to wrestle. She had already hung it up for wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And we laughed about that, right? She told me, I will say this. So I'm kind of giving a little bit away, but I'll tell you. So her brother passed, right? But he had 3 goals. It was to win state. It was to wrestle at Iowa, and 3 to be in Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
So the day that I do the interview with her and her mom, it's we're talking about that. Well, when she started back in wrestling, Iowa didn't have a women's team.
Nope.
Right?
Yep.
When she started back in wrestling, the girls' state championship wasn't sanctioned. It wasn't recognized.
Nope.
And it just happened to be that becomes recognized. She wins the state championship. Iowa starts a women's wrestling team. She's wrestling at Iowa. And the day that I did the interview with her and her mom, they were on their way back from the Olympic Training Center. And I was just, I mean, it was something else.
Yeah. And so now I kind of knew her story a little bit just from social media and following her and things like that. I think that's one thing that I find fascinating about the wrestling community is the ability to wear your heart on your sleeve, and not where, and some people aren't able to, but a lot of these guys, especially these high level people, are able to do that and not even worry about it. And I think that's another tale for people to take away from a lot of these athletes and some of these stories, that they're putting it all out there. You know, they're literally putting themselves and their life story out there for people to learn. Not to listen to it and be like, oh, that was a really good story. It's to learn from and to take pieces of the information that they're giving you and be like, hey, things are going to be rough. Things do happen for a reason, and you can persevere through them. And Lily Luft is pretty much the epitome of what that is, you know? So
Yes.
we've been following her for a long time too. And it was nice to see her in the book. I wasn't expecting it either until I started reading. I'm like, oh, is this Lily? Awesome.
Well, I didn't even, I don't know. I guess, I don't know if you call this humbleness or just dumbassery, right? I mean, I was just thinking like, oh, I'm not going to, I mean, obviously it doesn't make sense. I approached John Smith. Why would I approach her? But I was just going to let it go. Like, I'm like, it kind of felt like, hey, people knew it, but they really didn't know it. They went in depth with me and gave me some information. And it was because someone in the Iowa wrestling community said, hey, have you talked with her? And I said, well, no. They said, well, you should. And so I did. And the depth that they gave me, the story, I mean, we started bonding, which, by the way, like, so, you know, they donated her brother's organs when he passed. Well, I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky. Guess where the donor recipient of his heart was from?
Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah. My brother passed away. My youngest brother passed away in a car accident, and we donated his organs. So there was some natural, some natural bonding there already.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, and I might be getting teary eyed now and think about my brother and think about their situation. But we bonded a little bit through that, and they're just wonderful people that are. I mean, it's the epitome, like we talk about, like what a good person is do the best you can do without being self-centered, and that's the Luft family. They're going to do the best that they can do, and then at the same time help others. And it's just they're great, man. They're awesome.
They definitely are, and a great story. And I encourage every single person that has listened to this show, has seen the show, go out and get the book Mat Return. Again, you can get it physically in your hands, you can do it digitally. It doesn't matter where you get it. Get out and get it. We're at about an hour and a half. I want to give you the opportunity to kind of do some shout outs at the end here, because I know you've been working with people. If there's someone that you haven't mentioned you want to bring up, who you got for shout outs?
Oh man, so I mean, there's so many people, right? I don't want to leave people that just know. I mean, people know that there's some great coaches that you may not have heard of at the college level, right? There's also at the great coaches at the club level that you may have heard too. But there is a lot of good people in this sport, and you know, there's a lot of people that care about growing the sport, care about helping people individually. It's just like with anything else, you know, do your homework, vet people. Just because you don't know their name. I mean, I talked to one of our winners of our mat. He was telling me the other day, I got in touch with him. He won one of the award mats from Resolite. And all of a sudden we start talking about Foxcatcher and Dave Schultz.
Yeah.
Because he was there. He was there. And I was like, man, he was telling me about this. He said, well, just real quick, I think you'll enjoy the story. He tells me he rolls up the first day to go practice there. He's with Mark Schultz.
Oh boy.
He rolls up to the gate. Yeah. He rolls up to the gate, and the gates, he punches the code in, Mark does, and the gate's starting to open. And this guy's like, hey, Mark, there's a tank. There's a tank. And Mark's like, yeah. He's like, that's DuPont. He's like, no, there's a tank. So DuPont rolls up on him with a tank and opens the hatch and comes out. And he wants this guy's wrestling resume right now before you come on the property. And that was like his first experience obviously it's a tragedy what happened, right? But
yes.
Interesting story. So
Mark Schultz has been on the show. That guy has definitely got some interesting stories, and man, I could have done a 4-hour episode with that guy. I tell you what, but yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's the thing is like there's so much more. I'm expecting you to do a volume 2. I'm expecting it. I'm going to hold you. And if by next year I don't hear something about a volume 2, I'm going to start bugging you about a volume 2.
So let's make a deal. Like everybody, seriously. I'm pretty sure you're going to like the book, but get it. Like you said, you could get the electronic version. You can get the paperback. This is the first book that I've ever done a hardcover for, and I'm so pleased with it. It's really cool. The hardcover.
Really?
Yeah. And so, what I just want to say is, if you want to grow the sport, and not just because it's my book, but if you want to grow the sport, just let people know about it. I'm not saying that you have to go buy everybody a book or talk them into it. Just tell them about it. And if you read it, then you'll really know what it's about. And you'll be like, oh, okay, this is what they were talking about, right? Like I say a lot about being real and true because that's who I am. At the end of the day, I'm real and true about this book. And, so I'm not just saying that this stuff's in there. I mean, it talks about, in the beginning, like you said, it talk about some rules, regulations, but it's elementary. It's for those people that are learning the sport. At the back of the book, there's a resource guide, right? That has from every state you can look at. I mean, you can find a lot of good stuff. So there's after every 4th chapter, there is, I guess you'd call it a poem that I've written. The one for the girls is pretty cool. At the very end, my favorite is called The Essence of Wrestling. That's something that we've talked about, maybe putting music to and it being the one shining moment for the NCAA tournament. Help grow the sport that way. But if you would just send this out to your wrestling community through email, just let them know it's there. Just let them know it's there. And if anybody needs any of that information, you let me know. I mean, the book is available on Amazon, but I can shoot any of that information. The other thing that I like to say is we work with some clubs and some individuals for fundraising efforts. I can do some drop shipping. Like for instance, I'll just tell you even the numbers because I won't hide it, right? But there was a girl, she actually won Fargo, but it was so cool to work with her, what she did. So I drop shipped some books to her and I paid it. It cost me about $8 to pay for the book and the shipping. She gave me $10. So I got a couple dollars for each book. She sold it for 20 and she was able to have 10 go into her Fargo fund.
Nice.
And so she's getting the word out. So she was in the book too, so she was telling people, hey, I'm in this book.
But
just I want to help teams and wrestlers too, right? So if there's anything like that, I mean, I've sent books off to people that are doing like golf outings for their clubs and things. Just reach out to me. If I can help you, we'll work something out.
And when we get this out after either tomorrow, I got a soccer tournament tomorrow, but I will have information in the YouTube description that'll have a link to the book and any other information that you want to send me that you want in there. I can put all that right in the description of that. And then it'll also be included into the podcast description as well. So when it's out on Spotify, all that stuff will be out there. So folks, seriously, get out. Just if anything, just get the snippet of the book that you can get when you're looking at it on Amazon. And it gives you a taste of what's in there. So that way you can really understand that it's not, it's not a succession book. These are stories. These are all individual stories of people who have gone through adversity, winning, losing, It's all the story of wrestling, and really, I think it encompasses wrestling as a whole.
And it's not technique.
Nope.
I'll leave that to the experts. I think I'm more of an expert on people and their stories. I'll leave the technique. So, you mentioned the short stories. I actually envision kids having this book at a tournament and in between matches, because the stories are a page and a half at longest, except for Lily's. Hers is about 2.5 pages. But you could read this. You could read a story in between matches, and it won't disrupt your time at all. I mean, you got an hour or more? You can read a story in 10 minutes.
It may not disrupt your time, but it could also affect and maybe even better the outcome of your next match. You never know. Yep, yeah. Exactly. So, Coach Lang, man, it has been a pleasure talking to you. I tell you that much. I'm going to talk to you still for a minute once we're done here, but folks, stay tuned. Go get the book. Stay tuned for our website. Thanks to our sponsors, Appleton Tattoo, Anabolic Army, and then we got 920 Hats, hat company. But go out and get the mat return. Honestly, you're not going to be disappointed.
Hey, before I go, I do want to say this. I really appreciate you having me, and I've invited some people to come watch us tonight, right? And it's really because I want them to see you and the things that you're doing. I appreciate that. What you do to grow the sport. So your sponsors and the people that follow you, thank you for what you guys do following, because you do a great job helping sports. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Everybody, this has been another episode of the Vision Quest podcast. Go check out the mat return. We're going to be talking after we're done here. Everybody else, peace. All of our episodes are brought to you by Appleton Tattoo, located at 117 South Appleton Street in Appleton, Wisconsin, right off the main drag on College Avenue. You can't miss them. I've had some work done. I have a Celtic cross that covers my back that was done by Jason. We're not done yet. Jason Winans and crew, the artists that he have there, those guys are the best in the Fox Valley. They are definitely one to go to if it's something that you've just been kind of throwing around. They'll make you feel comfortable. It's a very clean environment. Very nice crew, and very willing to get done whatever you need done when you need it done. You can message them on Facebook. I know they're on Facebook. You can give them a call at 920-604-8289 and get in touch with Jason Winans and crew at Appleton Tattoo, located again in Appleton, Wisconsin at 117 South Appleton Street, right in Appleton. Very flexible hours, great crew, clean environment again. I would not send you anywhere else except for these guys. Appleton Tattoo.